Disneyland Resort is celebrating its 60th diamond anniversary with all new entertainment. World of Color Celebrate, Paint the Night Parade, and the Disneyland Forever Fireworks Spectacular. But as with all things, there is a history and heritage that has led them to this point.
My grandfather, Otto Prasowicz, started the musical dancing fountain concept back in 1928 at a place called the Bauhaus Resi in Berlin, Germany. Bauhaus Resi was a very much an over-the-top nightclub for its time. It had a telephone on every table. It had a pneumatic tube system similar to what we have at drive-through teller, so you can send a note to a pretty girl across the bar. And of course, it had the dancing fountains. The very early shows were, as advanced as they were pretty primitive. There were guys that were standing behind a stage who were twisting and turning valves as the theme of the music changed. So things would slowly come up to change the scene, and then something else would come and replace it. It took years before my grandfather developed an electrical system that could control all of the on-off and movement functions of the shows.
Across the Atlantic, a boxing promoter by the name of Harold Steinman was promoting a fight for his heavyweight, King Levinsky. Levinsky would face many of the biggest boxers of his day, Tommy Lohgren, Primo Carnera, Max Baer, and a bout with the Brown Bomber himself, Joe Louis.
I think it was one of his biggest deals that he did back in the 30s. You can see from the photograph during the signing. It's pretty exciting to see him have the biggest eyes in the photograph watching them sign the contract. You know it meant something to him at that time.
Steinman and Levinsky would part ways in 1937. Levinsky would never find the success in the ring he sought, but in 1932, he was the highest wage earner in the sport. Leaving boxing promotion behind, Steinman would happen to see skater Gloria Nord perform at the Polar Palace in Hollywood. Convinced she could be a star, Steinman borrowed $10,000 to create Skating Vanities, a traveling roller skating show featuring Nord and 100 other skaters.
Costumes, music, dancing on roller skates. And he was able to travel the world with it. Right after the war, it was very popular, and he took the show all over Europe.
In 1952, the tour led through East Berlin, where the show's trucks were impounded by the communist Red Police.
He was stuck in Berlin, at which time he went to the Berlin Industrial Exhibit and saw Prasowicz dancing fountains in action. For Steinman, the light bulb went on right away. He approached my grandfather and negotiated a deal for exclusive rights to the Western Hemisphere.
Steinman created Dancing Waters Incorporated and brought the water shows to America.
From 52 on, Dancing Waters purchased literally hundreds of shows for my grandfather. They toured throughout the United States.
He was a showman. He was in show business.
That's exactly
he probably figured, you know, these are so great people, we'll pay money to see them. I know that they went to a lot of hotels. They did Miss America.
Expos, convention centers.
They did state fairs, they did county fairs, Miss Universe, World's Fairs. The last 7 years of Liberace's career, his grand finale was Dancing Waters behind him on stage. So there is a really strong history of the Dancing Waters, and you know, their contribution to the promotional side of things is something that we'll always be grateful for.
In 1970, one of the Dancing Waters shows was purchased by the Disneyland Hotel.
It may not look like much, but where we're currently standing is the former home of the Fantasy Water Show. And before that, what's known as the Dancing Water Show opened in 1970 at the Disneyland Hotel. It was an instant hit. A lot of people loved it. It actually used to be a restaurant located very close by where people could sit out at night and watch the show. And throughout the years, it met a lot of technological upgrades for the fountains, the lighting. In the year 1990, they made the decision to go ahead and remove the original show. And they no longer had the rights to the Dancing Waters name because Dancing Waters is no longer in business. In 1991, they officially opened the Fantasy Water Show, which was built by Michael Prasowicz and a new form of the Waltzing Waters technology. That show was operational and also saw new technological upgrades through the years up until 2004 when the show was finally closed down. I was about 4 years old. I came over, my dad brought me here, and we sat out and watched the water show, and instantly I was hooked. Just the lights, the water, the sound, the atmosphere, the whole area. I just didn't want to leave. And I believe, sure enough, we stayed for the second show that same evening and watched it, and ever since then, every time I came out here, it was a tradition I had to be brought out here to watch the Fantasy Water Show every night.
One of my earliest memories working here at the Disneyland Resort was sometimes I got to actually work over at the hotels, and we had a little show called Fantasy Waters, and it was just a delightful little show, and it was a fan favorite for a very long time. We would have park guests as well as hotel guests, and even some neighborhood friends that used to come by regularly to see it. It was the early predecessor to World of Color, and there's just something so charming about it. World of Color Classic Show, the original show, opened in June of 2010. It was a long time in the making though. However, the creative team started thinking and dreaming it up actually in 2005. So it took a lot of time, trial, tribulations, technical advances needed to be made. Different ways to explore the creative were sorted through. But in 2010, we opened the original show. This year, for the 60th Diamond Celebration, we actually got to do a whole new show hosted by Neil Patrick Harris. We were thrilled that he was available and interested in joining us. And he takes us, along with Mickey Mouse, of course, through the different eras of the park, animation, some of the fun music.
We are at a soundstage in the middle of Southern California filming my involvement in the new World of Color show for the 60th anniversary Diamond Celebration at Disney California Adventure. So I'm going to get to be bounced around from water spout to water spout with Mickey Mouse, singing and having a little bit of a tour through the park. It's really exciting.
In addition to Neil hosting the show, there are new creative special effects.
Well, the creative team has a lot of fun with this show. I mean, it's the only venue I can think of where you can project on water. You've got fogs, you've got flames, you've got lasers. It's a whole new canvas and way to pull a show together. So it's a whole new toolbox that we get to have a lot of fun with. We had fire before, but now we have a fireball, and it is amazing. You can really feel the heat coming off the water with it. So if you happen to have gotten a little wet from the fountains, or if it's a cold night, that fireball warms you up, and it is spectacular to see. I mean, it's just a show-stopping moment. We also added some projections onto the fun wheel, so you can see some new animation up there on the fun wheel, and a great place to play some video. As well as we always had lights on the coaster, now we have even more. So always have to be pushing the envelope and doing a little bit more for each show. It's really important to us, and it's the core of Disney principles, of course, to always start with a story. It's important that the creative is never lost in the technology. While we have so many bells and whistles and fun toys to play with and things to dream up, it has to start with a story. So the creative team really works long and hard at thinking about what the story is, what we want our guests to see and feel and think about during the show. And once we have that locked in, then we can think about what's the technology that helps tell that story best. We never want to have an effect just to have an effect. We want it to tell the story. Celebrate really kind of tells the path that got us from an orange grove many years ago to now today what the Disneyland Resort is. So we got the opportunity to see the path that Walt put us on, where it's taken us, and where we have to go in the future. We had a lot of fun creating the new 60th show.
Join Cox in a magical sweepstakes celebrating Disneyland Resort 60th Diamond Celebration. Come into your local Cox Solutions store now until June 17th for a chance to win a 2-night stay at a Disneyland Resort hotel, Disneyland Resort tickets, and other prizes. And don't forget to watch Spotlight Disney, the exclusive Cox television special that takes a look behind the celebration at the happiest place on Earth.
Bob Yanni, who was the vice president when I came into the organization, used to tell us how when Walt Disney World opened, he would look out over Bay Lake and the Seven Seas Lagoon and see this vast darkness and think there needed to be something there because there were hotel guests, and when the park closed in the evening there was nothing to do. So he thought, let's put some sort of a parade out on the water. And so they created what they called light screens, which is basically a flat mesh of wire and string it with different colored lights. And they wanted a soundtrack to go with that. So they put a sound system on the barges and they figured out how to power those with generators. And they would drive it out on the lake at night and drive past the hotels and give people a bit of a show.
On October 25th, 1971, the electrical water pageant premiered at Walt Disney World in Florida. It proved to be popular with guests and inspired a parade that would be presented both at Disneyland and at Walt Disney World. The Main Street Electrical Parade began its run on June 17th, 1972.
I was still in college and I had been to Disneyland with some friends and seen the first electrical parade. It just knocked me out, and I thought to myself, someday I want to be involved with stuff like this. I want to do that. Electronic sound was compelling, the lights, the audience, everything about the staging of the event just sort of impressed me, and I thought, if I can figure out how to do this for a living, then I've got it made. And since I was working with the Moog Synthesizer Company doing local demonstrations of their equipment, I eventually received a phone call from Jack Wagner, who was the voice of Disneyland and the producer for the entertainment division. And he said, I need to borrow your synthesizer. I understand you have one. And I said, well, yes, I do. So we made a deal and we bartered. I got a roll of recording tape and he got to borrow the synthesizer for a day. And we struck up this friendship. And he said, later on, I may have a job for you. In January of 1975, I started working with Jack at his home in the dining room, recording the soundtrack for the Bicentennial Parade for Disneyland and Walt Disney World.
After the run of the Bicentennial Parade, it was planned that the Main Street Electrical Parade would return to both parks with an updated soundtrack.
The music that we know as the theme for the Main Street Electrical Parade, Baroque Hoedown, was used for the electrical water pageant. Walt Disney World was to receive a carbon copy of the new Main Street Electrical Parade with Disneyland, which meant that they could not use Baroque Hoedown for both the water pageant and the Main Street Electrical Parade. So I was enlisted to create a new soundtrack for the electrical water pageant. When I was working on the music for the electrical water pageant, I knew that the electrical parade was coming back, and I thought, hearkening back to my experience that June night in 1973, when I said I want to do that, this was my chance. So I figured out a way to create this opening window idea so that we could have a fanfare. I wanted to create a moment when the lights went out on a musical cue instead of just music fading up and lights switching off randomly. I thought this will be a much stronger show if we can marry the music to the lights. And in order to do that, I had to create an introduction. So that's when I created the opening fanfare, and I pitched that to Bob Yanni and to Jim Christensen, the music director, and Jack Wagner, the producer, and they said, oh, we like that, let's do that. And that's how I got involved with the first electrical parade. It's widely believed that the electronic voice was part of the Main Street Electrical Parade beginning in 1977, and that's not exactly true. That very first year was Jack Wagner's voice unprocessed, reading the same copy. It wasn't until the following year, 1978, when I heard Battlestar Galactica on TV and the Cylons had this electronic voice. And I said, aha, that is a great idea for the electrical parade. So in 1978, when we updated the parade, we added the electronic voice, which is now basically a signature of the electrical parade opening.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Disneyland proudly presents our spectacular festival pageant of nighttime magic and imagination in thousands of sparkling lights and electro-synthomagnetic musical sounds. The Main Street Electrical Parade.
My favorite memory of the relaunch of the Main Street Electrical Parade is standing on Main Street behind people when the music begins, the lights go out on the fanfare cue, and they start clapping along. That's my favorite moment. I always love to walk up and down the street and just soak in the people enjoying the fact that we have created a great initial moment for them. For many years, it had been rumored that the Main Street Electrical Parade would someday go away and be replaced by something even bigger and brighter. And it never seemed to go away. It always just seemed to stay. So there was a little bit of a surprise when it was finally taken away, but it seemed like that was inevitable and that there would be something bigger and better to eventually replace it.
In 2010, the lights of the Electrical Parade would go dark after its final performance at the Disneyland Resort.
Paint the Night is the new Disney Electrical Parade. It pays homage to the classic original Electrical Parade with some twists. As we know, that technology has evolved so much. With the Electrical Parade that started in 1972, we had costumes that were lit, we had floats that were lit. It was wonderful. It was mostly incandescent lights. Now we have lights that dance on the floats and also on the costumes. Our Cars crew, for example, part of the choreography is once they get in the line, each of them just light up one at a time. And it's just this amazing row of light that goes by. And they're with our Mack truck.
The giant bass drum from the original parade makes a return appearance.
When the float goes by, there's this wonderful drum and a screen that dances and has animation, which you have the technology to be able to have actual animation moving on a float.
The bass drum isn't the only nod to the past.
What I love about Belle, it's sort of an homage to the Blue Fairy. It's as big as life, and Belle is that same concept. And behind her is a screen with animation. You see Belle and the Beast dancing with flowers and roses. It's so different and unique, and that's some of the nuances or the technology we can add now that makes a big difference in this parade. The finale is really wonderful because at the very end, of course, we have Mickey Mouse, who is the star of the show, always. And he is in the Sorcerer's Apprentice outfit, and it lights up, and it's wonderful. And what's great about Mickey is because the float, the lights, the technology, the lights dance, so Mickey is actually making the lights dance when he does his choreography.
But it takes more than just technology and LEDs to light up the parade route.
The performers are wonderful. The energy and the excitement to be able to open a new electrical parade was really wonderful, and to experience all of that. And they're spectacular. They work so hard and they have such a passion for what they do, and you can see it in their performance. Being around during the electrical parade the first time and then being back, and to see young people come into this electrical parade with this kind of enthusiasm is a joy for me. The night that it opened, I was fortunate enough to be able to walk the parade route with all the guests the first night. Classic electrical parade music. You hear that in the front announce, and you hear it throughout the parade and all the different units that go by. I wanted to see what the guests' reaction would be. No pun intended, but it was electric. So as I'm walking along and waiting, and I hear the announce come up, the guests just, it was so loud, and it was so special, and I forgot that I was actually working this parade and working here. I felt like I was a part of something so special and unique, and I still do. I still really feel that way about this parade. It's been wonderful. It's a whole different way of looking at an electrical parade and looking at how the technology has made something that everybody loves into something even more special.
Join Cox in a magical sweepstakes celebrating Disneyland Resort 60th Diamond Celebration. Come into your local Cox Solutions store now until June 17th for a chance to win a 2-night stay at a Disneyland Resort hotel, Disneyland Resort tickets, and other prizes. And don't forget to watch Spotlight Disney, the exclusive Cox television special that takes a look behind the celebration at the happiest place on earth.
The first incendiary devices that can be considered fireworks were probably produced in Asia, somewhere in India or China, about 2,000 years ago. The people already knew the many uses of bamboo. They first dried the stalks that they cut, and they put them, the stalks over fire. And because there's air trapped in the nodes of the bamboo, sometimes the stalks would explode. And so people thought, well, this is a great noise maker. Let's use it to frighten away evil spirits, or when we celebrate some occasion, like Chinese New Year's or a wedding or housewarming, we could also set off these bamboo. So these would be the first firecrackers. Chinese alchemists who were around for thousands of years, unlike Western alchemists who were trying to find some way of turning cheaper materials into gold, were much more interested in finding some potion or elixir of immortality. But in the process, experimenting with all sorts of chemicals, discovered the formula for gunpowder. After 1,000 or more years of experimenting, the Chinese really had a good knowledge, quite a lot of experience on what exactly the composition of the gunpowder should be for fireworks and firecrackers, and literally how to package them in paper.
In 1956, just 1 year after Disneyland opened, Walt Disney was looking for one last gift he could give his guests before they left for the night. Legend tells that one evening after the park had closed, Walt viewed a fireworks test in the Disneyland parking lot. When the crew met with Walt after the display, Walt exclaimed, "Let's give it a try." That summer, Disneyland began its legendary fireworks shows. Over the years, the Disneyland fireworks shows grew and pushed the boundaries of the art and technology of fireworks. One of the greatest advances came with the development of air launch, a system for using pressurized air to launch fireworks shells into the sky.
Air launch was a technology used by the military to lob dummy shells into a war game situation without using actual explosives. Disney's technical director, Tom Craven, thought this would be a way to do several things with fireworks, not the least of which is eliminate the massive amount of black powder smoke that's generated at a launch site. It had additional benefits in that when we can control the pressure underneath the shell that catapults it into the sky, we can take one shell and send it to any height we want. Once you eliminate the black powder charge from underneath the shell, which is what lights the time fuse that then triggers the final burst, you need some other way to trigger the final burst. So Disney WDI invented a computer chip that lives in the shell that will give off a spark at exactly the right time. It has a little computer programmable capacitor which holds on to a little electric charge until you tell it it's time to go. So we program the chip before the shell is catapulted into the sky by compressed air. The chip counts down, and when you've told it it should go, it goes, and the shell explodes. So now we had the capability of not only controlling the individual height of a shell, but also the precise time that it would burst. When I was called in to direct the first holiday illumination show for Epcot, I envisioned a shooting star effect, or a comet that would come across the lagoon from the side. And there was no way to do that with a conventionally launched shell. So we developed a way to do that with air launch, and basically the shell is itself just a ball of chemical that is lit as it exits the tube and flies across the sky as it self-consumes. And that creates the shooting star or the comet effect that's now used nightly in the Disneyland show. The Mickey ears that we see every night in Disneyland Forever is one of our first air launch effects. It's created by shooting 3 shells simultaneously, 2 smaller ones and 1 larger one, and controlling with air launch pressure the exact height that each shell flies to. Without air launch, it would be impossible to do that effect.
Thousands of years of innovations in fireworks and other technologies are on display for the Diamond Celebration with the Disneyland Forever Fireworks Spectacular. For the 60th anniversary, the Disneyland Forever Fireworks Spectacular is pushing boundaries again by combining fireworks and projection mapping.
We have a really cool new fireworks show that is really going to blow your mind. It features our traditional fireworks like we do them, but we've added a whole new effect. So on Main Street at the castle and at Matterhorn and other places in the park, we're actually going to project around you. So when you go into these cool animated numbers that we're going to now put to fireworks, you're now suddenly immersed in all the different scenes. So imagine you're in See the Light from Tangled. Suddenly as you hear that beautiful song and we're painting the sky in gold, suddenly all the lanterns start to float up all around you. When Elsa comes on and does Let It Go, we now freeze everything around you and turn it to ice. So it's really going to take fireworks and make it, I think, four-dimensional, because now you're totally in another world as you watch them.
Different viewing locations in the park will offer unique experiences for the show's audience. In addition to projection mapping and pyrotechnics, there are lighted inflatables, smoke, snow, and other effects, and new characters high above Sleeping Beauty Castle. But the fireworks themselves are still the star of the show.
There are amazing new pyrotechnics that we're using for the very first time in any of our pyrotechnic shows in any of our resorts. I'm very excited for our guests to see it.
And what ties it all together is the incredible musical soundtrack. And for the 60th anniversary and the Disneyland Forever Fireworks Spectacular, a very special song was written by renowned composer Richard Sherman.
Today was a very special day. We recorded a song called A Kiss Goodnight to commemorate the 60th anniversary of Disneyland opening. And it's very special, it's a very personal thing to me because Walt Disney was the one who came up with the idea of giving fireworks at the end. He wanted to give the folks that were leaving the park after a day at the park an extra special little extra gift from him. And that was what he called a little kiss goodnight. I was thrilled to be able to write this song. I decided to call it A Kiss Goodnight. And it was exciting today because we recorded it with one of my very favorite singers in the whole wide world, and that's Ashley Brown, who was Mary Poppins.
The first note plays of the intro and it just brings you to such a magical place. I remember when I first heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what you want when you see a fireworks show or when you think of Disneyland.
In a way, it's kind of my getting back with Walt again after all these many years. You know, he's been gone a long time. He's always been in my heart, and I always remember him, and I owe so much of my world, my career, to Walt Disney. But this is one of the times where I'm writing something about him, for him, and it's kind of very special for me. Walt would never show what he felt. He never said it to you. To behind your back, he'd say something beautiful, complimentary, but to you, he'd just say, yeah, that'll work. That would be it. And I can hear him up there right now saying, yeah, that'll work.
And so with A Kiss Goodnight, the Disneyland Forever Fireworks Spectacular and the day at the Disneyland Resort come to an end. Over the last 60 years, Disneyland has entertained, thrilled, amused, and delighted those who enter its gates. It has filled them with joy, wonder, and awe. But perhaps its greatest gifts are the memories that have been created there and those that are yet to come.